Hi everyone, welcome back to Open a Book. Guess what? I finally finished Emma! So it's true. I finally finished Jane Austen's Emma. That is 2 Jane Austen books down. 3 more to go. And quite frankly, I have started Persuasion. Not impressed so far. In fact, I've had a very hard time getting into Persuasion. I have tried to reread the beginning of this book 4 times already, and I still don't have a clue as to what's going on. I do know that Persuasion was her last book. Emma was her second to last book. And so I'm not entirely sure if this was something she was doing on her deathbed and it just didn't work out. I don't know. It just feels very heavy and weird and I don't get it. I'm not really connecting with Jane in this writing. This one, the writing feels a little sporadic, schizophrenic. It feels really weird, and I don't know who she's talking about half the time or what she's talking about. And I haven't really had that kind of problem with her writing in Pride and Prejudice or with Emma. Emma a couple times, but only because the verbiage was a little bit different than our modern day English. But this book seems to read heavy and weird. She has one paragraph that is an entire sentence. Yeah. Before I move on to talk to you a little bit about Emma, I would like to tell you what I'm reading now, which is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So I'm really excited for this book. As you can see, I just started this last night. I can't get enough of it. Total polar opposite from Jane Austen. Okay, these two are not even close in the spectrum of writing. Seriously, we have a lot of fun and free loving and dancing and romance going on. And I do know that this is kind of a romance. However, right now at the beginning, it feels heavy and hard and tough to swallow at times. I am beginning this, loving it, can't put it down, as you can see. This is my Barnes & Noble copy. And you notice I didn't say Barnes & Nobles. And I like that it's big lettered. Is it big lettered or is it just my glasses? I don't know. But as you can see, I really do love this inside and then the cover page. And then the edges here, the red edging around the book. But that's about it. There's no illustrations whatsoever in here going on. So just a normal book that I'm reading. Nothing to get too excited about on the inside of this book. But the outside is really nice. Cover is very flexible. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. What I am here to talk to you about today is Emma. And my thoughts on Emma. Now, my friend Anne and I have been doing a Jane Austen book club, and this was our very first book that we were reading in Jane Austen. I had already read Pride and Prejudice and loved it so much that my friends got excited about it and wanted to start a Jane Austen book club, which we did. So when we started reading Emma, I was really into it. I thought it was really great, really a fun read, very comical, very interesting. My friend Anne and I were the only ones doing the book club at the time. My friend Karen was unable to join us for this book. Hopefully she will join us for the next one. Anne and I got together once a week, every Thursday, and discussed what we had read. These are some of the highlights of the book, and one of the highlights that's just an entire page of Kingsley. Seriously, I loved what he was saying in this part so much that I just had to just take the whole darn page and say, you know what, if I were to go on and on with this page, that would be it. I mean, I would just be, putting little tags everywhere, which I did on this page. So I thought, forget it. I'm just going to put it on that. Because this is a whole conversation between Emma and Mr. Knightley about Frank Churchill, which I thought was one of the most brilliant parts of this book. The dialogue between Emma and Knightley are the best, the absolute best, which is why I didn't like the book. It was such a disappointment at the end, okay? Raise your hand. I am going to put up a poll right now. And I know that people love Jane Austen, and I do, and I really do. However, I need to know how many of you read Emma and went, wait, what just happened? Was that the end? My poll is, were you disappointed at the ending of Emma? Please fill out the poll here or here. I don't know. It changes on me when I edit. So please fill out the poll whether you thought the ending of Emma was disappointing or not. Now, the reason why I say it was disappointing to me is that you've been taken along on this ride with Emma through this whole story. It's about Emma, okay? So this book, you are on a journey with Emma. You are on the highs and you are on the lows, and you are on those plateaus, and you are on those moments where you feel like, oh, Emma, that was bad. That was bad. Knightley really called that one. So you really do get on this ride with her. And it is a pretty intense ride sometimes. And I don't mean intense in the way of Jane Eyre intense, but I'm talking about the intensity of the different relationships that she's in. One thing that I noticed with Emma is that Emma changes her personality for different people. She's different with Knightley than she is with Miss Taylor or Mrs. Weston. She's different with Frank than she is with Mr. Knightley. She's different with her father than she is with Harriet. She's different with Harriet on a totally different level than she would be with Jane. So there was this complexity about Emma, because I'm not saying that we all don't sometimes slip into a little difference when we're around someone else or someone different. However, we have a consistency in our personality that's not always changing to fit the mood of others. So with that, I found Emma's character to be a little rough around the edges. She wasn't someone I could really connect to and relate to, and that's okay. Jane Austen even said that she would probably be the only one who would ever like Emma. Now, I'm not saying I don't like Emma, and she meant the person, the character of Emma. And it's not that I don't like Emma. She could be a little bit rough sometimes, especially when she was in the company of Frank Churchill. She would get rude, and she would do very embarrassing and dislikable things that felt like she was being a bully, because Frank Churchill was acting like a bully. Now, when we get to the end of this story, I find a lot of forgiveness where forgiveness should not have been given so easily. And I do mean that about Frank Churchill. I felt like he should not have been forgiven or off the hook so easily. This was not something that I felt that he did that really anyone should have forgiven, particularly Jane. Like, Jane, why are you staying with this guy? What a jerk. Really? Why are you even entertaining the thought of marrying this jackass who is just downright wrong? Seriously wrong. And we all know it. We all feel it the second he enters into this story. We feel that presence of wrong right off the bat. And nothing that he says about Jane in the end, or his apology or his letter, can ever convince me that that person that he was portraying throughout the entire book was not who he was. It was easy to understand Darcy's character changing in Pride and Prejudice. It really was, because you could sense that something was changing in him. But with Frank Churchill, I did not feel like anything made him want to change. He was a complete jerk to Emma, to Mrs. Elton, which she deserved to be a jerk to anyway, but to Jane and Jane's family, the pianoforte, the flirting with Emma, the find me a wife Emma, all of this stuff, the rudeness, just the frustration and the anger that he presented, and how the only reason why he showed up to visit his father was because Jane Fairfax came back to town. So right off the bat, this gives us a little insight into Frank's character. We know that he didn't come there to see his father. He came there because Jane was there. That's it. There was no other reason. And while, yes, he stayed with his father and he got to know Mrs. Weston, and he got to know her and liked her, so we think, the reality is he would have never came had it not been for Jane. And so we get that going on. Now, we also know throughout the book that Mrs. Elton was not very into Emma. She didn't really like Emma. And so you don't really get Mrs. Elton treating Emma very badly, except for when they went to Box Hill. And that was only because Frank and Emma were acting like jerks to the entire group and insulted Miss Bates, which I thought was absolutely uncalled for. And I didn't think that that was Emma's character. So when that happened, I was taken back. But I really loved how Knightley told her off about it. That kind of goes into this whole thing of her and Knightley hooking up. I don't get it. I can't see these two together. I don't want to see these two together. She's 16 years younger than him, and while that may be okay if you're in your 30s and he's 46, that I can see. But she's probably in her early 20s, 22, 23. So we're looking at 50. So we're looking at 39 years old to her 23. Now, that just seems a little weird. And then when he tells her that he's been in love with her since she was 13 years old, I want to... Why? She's 13, he's 16 years older. You do the math. I'll wait. Got it? Do you have the number now? 29? Falling in love with a 13-year-old? You'd go to jail. Okay? So I don't particularly care for that idea that he's been in love with her since she was 13 years old. It kind of grosses me out. It would be one thing if he said, you know, I fell in love with you at the ball. That I would have been able to see. I would have been able to see that there was something that was drawing him to her and her to him. But there was nothing in this story that made me feel like there was something going on. There was some chemistry happening between these two characters that you were just like, get together already. Never in this entire book did I say, I want her to be with Knightley. Never. I wasn't rooting for Knightley. I wasn't saying I was rooting for him when he was telling her off. But that was all the time. There were very rare instances where he was not telling her off or scolding her or treating her like the child that she was acting like. So what then was she attracted to? What was he attracted to? Because he never seemed to find any really good qualities about Emma. He seemed to always pick out the bad things about her, and he was never really entirely wrong. So what then are you in love with, Mr. Knightley, to Emma, who is always feeling like he scolds her and that he has nothing nice to say to her. And she feels that, and she knows that. She always feels punished by him. So where's the love? Tell me where these two people make a good match. Then tell me where Jane and Frank make a good match. They don't. And she says straight out, I will never be able to call you George. You will always be Knightley to me. Well, then that's not intimate. That doesn't feel intimate with me if you can't be intimate by calling this person that you claim that you love to be George, to be your companion. He's still Knightley. He's still the ruler over you. And I'm not, don't get me wrong. I'm not going into this feminist, misogynist crap. I'm not going to do that. I am not. My point is, though, is that he is over her in years. He does treat her like a father more than he does a friend or even a lover. Because the father is more tender and, kind of weepy and weary all the time. And she always has to conform to that and be appeasing to the father and always having to reassure him on everything. So in Knightley, I feel like he's more the father that she really needs. But then they get together and there's no bam, they got together. It's like, yeah. If you could even feel that coming on, you would have been like, yeah, okay, I can get behind this. This is good. But it's not. That moment is just a complete letdown. It's a dud. It is a far out, crappy way to get two people together. It was disappointing. I was like, what's happening? I seriously, my friend Anne made this comment about the pork that was given to the Bateses. So there is like a 3-page ordeal about the pork going on, or about a dinner party going on. We get a whole chapter about putting this ball together, right? We do. But when it comes to Knightley telling Emma his feelings for her, if you had missed that sentence, you would have never known they were together. Never. Because at the end of the book, at that point, you still have 2-3 chapters to go. And there's nothing really that gives you this idea that they're together, that they are building this relationship together. In fact, what they're doing is they're kind of building the relationship apart. Because he's still living in his world, she's still living in hers, and all she can think about is, how is she going to tell her father and how is her father going to handle this? And that's all it's about, is her father. And my friend Anne made a good point that the only reason why they got married was because of chicken robbers. Yeah. And then it's a short little blip. They got married, and Mrs. Elton was incredibly rude about it. And I'll read that last. So spoilers, if you haven't read this book. Okay. So here's the last paragraph of the book. The wedding was very much like other weddings, where the parties have no taste for finery or parade. That's it. That's it. And Mrs. Elton, from the particulars detailed by her husband, thought it all extremely shabby and very inferior to her own. Very little white satin, very few lace veils, a most pitiful business. Selina would stare when she heard of it. But in spite of these deficiencies, the wishes, the hopes, the confidence, the predictions of the small band of true friends who witnessed the ceremony were fully answered in the perfect happiness of the union. Pretty much this last paragraph about the wedding is about Mrs. Elton's disapproval of it. And despite it all, those who were there liked it. But that's it. That's your ending. In this one little paragraph, this is where you know those two are getting hooked up. Granted, you'll hear it here and there in the rest of the last 2 chapters, but not a whole lot. You're kind of wrapping things up in the last 2 chapters with Harriet and Jane. Now, the other thing that really irked me about this story in the end, particularly with Frank Churchill, seriously. Frank would have been slapped. Let's just put it that way. I don't know. How many of you slapping Frank Churchill? Come on. Let's hear it. I don't know about you, but this guy is an absolute complete jerk in 5 million ways, because now we're at the end of the story and everyone feels so sorry for him and they're so happy for him and Jane, and you're like, wait, what? Everybody wanted Emma and Frank to be together. Emma wanted to be with Frank, but then what? She doesn't want to be with Frank anymore, and yet she still entertains this idea and she's flirting with him and blah, blah. And all in front of Jane, his fiance. This whole entire time, Frank and Jane are engaged. Nobody knows it. And he's flaunting Emma in front of her, dangling her in front of Jane. And Jane just puts up with it. In the end, she just forgives it all because now it can all come out in the open because the aunt died? No. No, 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 no. The worst part comes at the end when Emma goes to see Mrs. Weston, and Frank Churchill is there, and Jane is there, and now we've known through the whole story of Emma why Emma didn't like Jane, because Jane was always Miss Perfect. Now, granted, we get a little moment where Emma starts reflecting on this and thinking differently, but our feelings don't change that quick. We don't automatically just shut off that feeling that somebody has, just not sit right with us, even though we may have forgiven that flaw. That wasn't particularly theirs, but that people were always putting on us. So we know that everyone was telling Emma how great Jane was all the time. And that was what frustrated her. It wasn't that she didn't like Jane per se. It was that she didn't like the way that everyone talked about Jane being so perfect in every way. But somehow, when Frank Churchill does it, at the end, he's having a conversation with Emma, and the entire time that he's talking to Emma, all he can talk about the whole entire time is how perfect Jane is. And Emma just sits back and smiles. There is no, it was eating her up inside. And those feelings came back about how Jane's so perfect. No, there's no mention of this whatsoever. Jane Austen, what were you thinking? Now, I know we want our characters to change and to grow. That's great. But they don't grow overnight. They don't just change overnight. That is something that takes some time. And granted, we see that growth with Jane and Emma, but there's no real reconciliation between the two. It's just like this unknown wink or something that they have between them. Again, I would have loved to have seen that in the book. I would have loved to have seen Emma and Jane come together and truly bond and say, this is okay. But I really didn't get that. I didn't feel that. And Frank, just this whole situation with Frank was wrong in a million ways. And why he was forgiven by anyone is beyond me, because the guy's a leech. He is an absolute jerk and deserves no forgiveness at this point in time. I know we all deserve forgiveness, but we can't just let it go that easily. And if you're Jane, why would you put up with that? Why would you let some young man do that? And why are you going back to the Campbells? I don't get it. None of it I don't get. Mrs. Alton's story was interesting and funny and a little bit disturbing at times. You really wanted to smack her, but you really wanted to smack Emma a lot. You really wanted to smack Frank a lot. You really just wanted to just smack a lot of people in this book. What I found interesting was how if the father, Mr. Woodhouse, or anyone else in the book, it would have drove people crazy. that constant worrying, that constant fretting over everything, that nervousness, like Mrs. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. That kind of behavior was nonsensical in Pride and Prejudice, but it was praised in Emma. Granted, Mrs. Bennet was out of control with it, and Mr. Woodhouse was more subdued in his approach of worriness and constant fretting. But I just felt like if I'm gonna like him, I need something to make me like him. But again, I didn't really like him either because his constant worrying and talking about all this other stuff just drove me a little crazy. So that's my feelings on Emma. I could go on and on about a lot of things that I felt with Emma, but I'm already hitting the 30-minute mark and I have to edit this down so that you can watch it in 3 minutes. So anyway, Emma is complete. I've tried Persuasion. It's not going anywhere for me, so I'm taking some time away from Jane Austen just for a little bit. I think the next book I'm going to try is Sense and Sensibility, but right now I am really enjoying Jane Eyre. Take care when I read Jane Eyre. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And if you want to follow me on my other social media platforms, follow me here at Instagram, then follow me here on Facebook. I would like to know what your thoughts on Emma were. If you read the book Emma by Jane Austen, please feel free to let me know what you thought about Emma, Frank, Jane, and Mr. Knightley. Let me know if you really liked Emma ending up with Mr. Knightley. And if not, who would you have hooked her up with? I am so grateful that you came to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to continue watching and don't forget to subscribe.